Hello everyone, John here with a deck tech for one of my favorite commanders, Toshiro Umezawa. So Toshiro is a really interesting commander to build around. First of all, mono black, so we are working with all of those challenges and limitations that exist in mono black, but also a lot of the fun, juicy stuff too. Because black has such limited targeted removal for anything other than creatures, we have to really try to hit our opponents in their hands, and we have to take some of the key cards out of their decks before they even get a chance to play them. So we're being very preventative with this deck. The other aspect, which is more unique to Toshiro as a commander, that we're going to be working with here today is his second ability, a poor man's Snapcaster Mage type effect. And it reads, whenever a creature an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from play, you may play target instant card in your graveyard. If that card would be put into a graveyard this turn, remove it from the game instead. You have to pay its mana cost, of course. It's not free, unfortunately. So essentially you get 2 uses out of your instant spells in this deck. So to get the maximum value out of Toshiro, we're going to want to be killing a lot of creatures. So we've loaded this deck up with a fair amount of kill spells. This is probably the 5th build of this deck. And the first iteration was, just full of kill spells. So I'm going to highlight some of the key strategies and the cards that enable them. Sudden Death. Split Second, it interacts with the stack in a way that shuts it down. Nothing can be played on the stack after a Split Second card has been played. So we play Split Second to interrupt somebody's combo, essentially, if their combo uses the stack. 2 black, 1 of any generic mana, instant speed, of course. Target creature gets -4 until end of turn. Also great because it gets around indestructible. Lose Hope is actually incredibly valuable for its ability to scry 2, and also the fact that it costs only 1 swamp. This helps us continue to see cards and to draw, and it complements the other draw power that we have in the deck. Instant speed kill spells have the ability to completely turn the tide of battle, to change someone's board state entirely, to change the future of the game, essentially. So for that, we have a card called Slaughter Pact. Costs 0 to play, instant speed. Destroy target non-black creature. At the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 2 and a black. If you don't, you lose the game. Fun card. I have not lost the game because of this. Force of Despair. It reads, if it's not your turn, you may exile a black card from your hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Destroy all creatures that entered the battlefield this turn. It's great if your opponents are playing elves and they drop 3 or 4 elves in a turn, or wolves or wolf elves, which is another deck that I play. We'll get into that in another video probably. Anything swarm related, this can really take care of. We actually don't run too many kill spells. It's really about getting that second use off of them. We've seen Sudden Death, Lose Hope, Slaughter Pact, Force of Despair, Hero's Downfall. Victim of the Night, I'm kind of ambivalent about. I think it's a good choice to include, but if a better kill spell were to come along, that's a flexible spot, I think. Defile, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each swamp you control. Instant speed, 1 black mana. In this deck, all we're playing is swamps. We have a few other utility lands, but we also have Urborg to make everything a swamp, so this can end up being turn 5. This can do -5 for 1. Turn 10, if we're doing some battle cruiser EDH, this can take out a 10/10. Defile just gets better as the game goes on. The more swamps you have, the more damage it does, and it still only costs 1 black mana. So for me, in my opinion, that is an auto-include. As is Diabolic Edict. Target player sacrifices a creature. This gets around a bunch of things. Normally I wouldn't play it in a deck that doesn't reuse spells, because I think a one-time value of an opponent sacrificing a creature is kind of tricky. We usually want something more targeted, probably. We want to give the opponent as little choice as possible in how we conduct our turns. That's kind of a general rule from me, unless we're playing some kind of group hug game. But because it can be kind of devastating to double Diabolic Edict somebody, this works. This is a very good card in this deck, and it's come in handy a lot of times for me, getting around Hexproof Shroud, Indestructible. Sacrifice is a very powerful ability when used properly. Bile Blight, 2 black, instant speed. Target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that creature get -3/-3 until end of turn. So this base level is just good at getting rid of swarm tokens, things like that. Usually gets rid of quite a lot of creatures, in my experience. Somebody's having a bad time out there. Tragic Slip. This card is amazing in this deck. Tragic Slip is 1 black mana, instant speed. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Its morbid effect is that creature gets -13/-13 until end of turn instead if a creature died this turn. This takes out so many things, and especially in this deck, if it follows your initial kill spell, or even if it is the first kill spell, if this takes out a 1/1 creature, and then there's a big baddie somewhere else on someone else's board, you get this again, and you get it for -13 the second time. You can chain this to itself. Just insane card. Tragic Slip is such a good card. I play it in decks other than this as well. For 1 black mana to do potentially -13 to a creature, it's just good. There's no question about it for me. Ulcerate. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. I lose 3 life. For 1 black mana, instant speed. It's not my favorite. It's another flex kill spell, but it is quite good for 1 black mana. Grasp of Darkness. Target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn for 2 black mana, instant speed. Just good. It's just good value. You know, you don't. Not every kill spell needs to have a second effect. Sometimes it's just good to kill the thing. You know, and killing the thing when Toshiro's on the field gives us a second effect, and potentially a third or a fourth effect even. So sometimes you just want to get that chain ball rolling so you can access the other instants that are in your graveyard for more of like a toolbox effect. Foul Renewal, 3 and a black, instant speed. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the toughness of the card returned this way. So this is usually both a kill spell and recursion. This can, really sway the course of battle if played at the appropriate time with the right creatures in your graveyard. We'll get into the creatures in a minute. So just to go through really quick what else we have. Scour from Existence, exile target permanent for 7 generic mana, instant speed. Late game it's great. And even mid-game, if you can double your mana, which black loves to do, swamps are great at doubling themselves, this can actually become targeted battlefield removal. We can usually only get rid of creatures, but this allows us to exile anything. It can be a Maze of Ith that's preventing us from winning the game. It can be an enchantment that's causing us to mill 10 cards every time we play a card or something. It can just get rid of anything. And that's very important for this deck because we don't usually have that ability. Vona's Hunger, the Ascend feature and Commander is amazing. We almost always get there. Vona's Hunger is 2 and a black, instant speed. It has Ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. And that counts your lands. So you're usually pretty quickly going to get there. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. If you have the City's Blessing, if you have 10 or more permanents, instead, each opponent sacrifices half the creatures he or she controls rounded up. So that is another pseudo board wipe. Very effective. It saved me many times. The Ascend feature in EDH is just bonkers. Cremate, exile target card from a graveyard, and draw a card for 1 black mana, instant speed. This is good early game. This draws you cards. This prevents early game graveyard shenanigans. So if someone's playing Kess, get rid of Cruel Ultimatum. If someone's playing Feldon, get rid of Bosch. Zombies, amazing against that. Graveyard Hate is just kind of essential in my opinion, and this card is great for that. And just rounding it out, Vampiric Tutor, of course, instant speed, 1 black mana. Pay 2 life, search your library for 1 card, shuffle your library, then put that card on top of your library. That's just an incredible tutor for 1 black. It's insane in this deck. Instant speed means you can tutor twice. And I also play top, Sensei's Divining Top in this deck, so if I Vampiric Tutor and then I want the card immediately, tap top, put it on the top of my deck, and then draw the card that I've just tutored for, it gets you there. It's a really great card. Wretched Confluence, 3 modes on this card. It costs 5, 2 black, 3 generic mana, but it's an instant speed spell. Choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Target player draws a card and loses 1 life. So, I could draw 3 cards. The opponent who has 3 life left, you can have them draw 3 cards off of this 1 card. Great value. Second mode, target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So because you can choose 1 mode 3 times, you can give a creature -6/-6. You can give 3 creatures -2, or just distribute them however you want. It's very effective to have choice. Choice is a huge part of this game. Wretched Confluence gives you those choices. The last choice, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So 3 creatures can potentially come back to your hand with this card. Very powerful for 5. And the fact that it's an instant speed spell means that you can potentially get 6 creatures back. You can get a creature back, kill a creature, draw a card, play Wretched Confluence again. It's just gross, that card. It's very good. Cabal Ritual, a little bit of mana ramp here. The fact that it's an instant speed dark ritual for 1 more generic mana, 1 mana and 1 black mana, gives you 3 swamps. It puts 3 swamps in your mana pool. That's already quite good because we can do it twice and we can net 2 additional mana if we don't hit threshold, but if we do hit threshold, this is where it gets kind of crazy. If you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, instead add 5 swamps to your mana pool. So you pay 4 for this and you get 10 mana. Because usually you're going to have over 7 cards in your graveyard, especially with all the instant speed spells we're playing. Cabal Ritual, more than half the time, ends up giving me 5 if not 10 mana. Shred Memory, more graveyard hate for 2 mana, 1 and a black, instant speed. Remove up to 4 target cards in a single graveyard from the game. So this locks out, even more so than Cremate does, some of the more recursion-heavy decks. But I really run it for its Transmute effect. Transmute, it costs 2 swamps and 1 generic mana. Discard this card, Shred Memory. Search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card. So 2. You can tutor a card for 2 mana and put it into your hand. Then shuffle your library. Play it only as a sorcery. I really love the Transmute effect because it's just a budget tutor effect. And the fact that it also is on an instant speed graveyard hate card makes it an auto-include for me. It can search up most of our kill spells. It can search up some of our equipment, like Umezawa's Jite. Shred Memory can go grab that for us. Just get the flavor right on track early in the game. Ratchet Bomb it also gets, which is another important removal spell. We'll get into artifacts a little bit later. We also have Mind Crank, which costs 2, which is also able to be tutored up by Shred Memory's Transmute effect. This is part of a infinite win combo present in this deck. So if we're close to getting that combo off, or we just use Shred Memory to tutor up Mind Crank and then hopefully go infinite and win. Distress. Shred Memory tutors up Distress. So if you know an opponent has something sneaky in their hand that they're going to use next turn to win potentially, or even if you suspect it, Distress helps you see if you're right, looks at opponent's hands, and allows you to discard a non-land card from it. So the tutor effect on Shred Memory just gives us options. It gives us Swift Foot Boots to protect Toshiro when we're at the beginning of our chaining process. It gets us Arguel's Bloodfast if we need some kind of draw power early in the game. That puts it right into our hands. So, pretty versatile spell. Very useful in this deck. So the last instant in this deck is Stunning Reversal. It's in a flex spot in my deck until a better spell comes along. So if you have any suggestions, go ahead, write them in the comments below. So we're going to move on to the creatures in this deck. Agent of the Fates. 2 black, 1 generic mana, human assassin with death touch. He has the heroic ability, which actually comes in handy a lot in this deck. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Agent of the Fates, each opponent sacrifices a creature, and that's on a 3/2 body. So this card is good in more ways than one. The heroic effect is actually amazing in this deck, especially if you can use one of your kill spells on Agent of the Fates and keep it around, but cause all opponents to sacrifice a creature. And this most often happens with cards like Lose Hope that will give Agent of Fates -1/-1, not killing it. But for 1, triggering its heroic effect, and 2, the second part of targeting Agent of Fates with Lose Hope is that you get to scry 2. So the value train here is at full steam. Next we have Dreamstealer, 2 and a black, human wizard with menace. When Dreamstealer deals combat damage to a player, that player discards that many cards. That's referring to how much damage Dreamstealer does to a player. So at first glance, it does 1 damage, so they discard 1 card of their choice. It's good, but it's not great. The Eternalize feature, 2 black, 4 generic mana, exile Dreamstealer from a graveyard, create a token that's a copy of Dreamstealer, except it's a 4/4 black zombie human wizard with no mana cost. Do this only as a sorcery. So then, when it has menace and hits for 4, that's potentially, mid to late game causing people to discard their entire hands, or at least making a huge dent in whatever mid to late game plans they may have, unless they want to put things in their graveyard. In that case, don't play Dreamstealer. Play something more like Vampire Nighthawk, Flying Death Touch Lifelink on a 2/3 body for 3, 2 black, 1 generic mana. Very good card. I think kind of underrated. It's just, there's so much value here, and especially in a deck like this that wants to half the time use its life points as mana. It helps replenish your life points, and in that way it kind of generates mana. Plague Crafter, again, more sacrifice effects, but this also pertains to a Planeswalker as well, which makes Plague Crafter quite good. So it reads, Plague Crafter, 2 and a black, for a human shaman. When Plague Crafter enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or a Planeswalker. Each player who can't discards a card. And it's a 3/2 body on that card. Our last creature in the 3 mana slot here is Hypnotic Specter. This card is a classic. The best thing about it is that when it hits an opponent directly, it triggers a random discard. And that's important because random is important. You, again, want to give your opponent as little choice as possible in how they interact with your creatures, their effects, your strategy in general. You just want to force them to do things. You don't want to give them the option to discard a land, for example, and then they don't need it mid to late game, so you kind of waste the discard effect. Random at least has the potential to hit somebody's Avacyn, for example, or a Crater Hoof that's sitting in somebody's hand could be taken out with this. So Hypnotic Specter's stats are that it is a 2/2 flyer, and its effect says when it deals direct combat damage to a player, that player randomly discards a card. And it costs 2 black, 1 generic mana. So it fits really well in that 3 mana slot. And mid to late game, early, mid, and late game, this card is quite good, but it's better, in my opinion, early game when people are trying to set up their combos, they're trying to get a board state, they're trying to get some draw power maybe. It limits their options. And when it hits like a really important card, it feels great. Gonti, Lord of Luxury, 2 black, 2 generic mana, legendary creature, Aetherborn Rogue. It has Death Touch, and the effect reads, when Gonti, Lord of Luxury, enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library. Exile one of them face down, then put the rest in the bottom of that library in a random order. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may look at it, you may cast it, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast it. This card is amazing in that it allows you to play cards outside of your color. Because you can cast opponents' spells and use mana as though it were any mana of any color to cast it, it really is essential in helping you get around your lack of removal and your lack of other, like you can play counter spells if you get lucky enough with Gonti. It really diversifies the deck, and it's the first or second card that I am always bringing back with my recursion spells here. And the fact that it has Death Touch is just so much value. There's so much value here. Sangromancer, 2 black, 2 generic mana, Vampire Shaman. It has flying. Its first effect, whenever a creature an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may gain 3 life. That's big with all of the kill spells we're running here. You have the potential to gain 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21 mana, or 21 life points, which can kind of be like pseudo mana in this deck, off of just one Toshiro kill spell chain. The other part of the effect, which makes this, I think, almost an auto-include in this deck, is that it also gains you 3 life whenever an opponent discards a card. So say you're not even on the offensive at all. Synchromancer's on the battlefield, but you're not attacking with it. An opponent has a few tokens out, another opponent kills a bunch of them or something. Say they do Pyroclasm, for example. Synchromancer survives Pyroclasm and potentially gains you 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30 life. Someone plays Secure at the Waste and then gets Pyroclasmed. You can gain a buttload of life off this card. And because life partly balances out mana cost here, this is kind of like a pseudo mana maker. It helps us keep our life points up. And in mono black, it's very easy to lose life points very quickly to your own spells. Cryptghast, double your black mana for a creature that costs 4 and has Extort tagged on, and it has a 2/2 body. Insane. It's just insane in this deck. I often put Lightning Greaves or Swiftfoot Boots on my Cryptghast rather than Toshiro because it's more important for me to have double black mana than it is more often to chain some kill spells together. Horobi, Death's Wail. So Horobi is a 4/4 flying creature that costs 2 black and 2 generic mana. It's a spirit. And its effect reads, whenever a creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, destroy that creature. So this card creates a board state that is very volatile. Horobi, it's just amazing here. The fact that it's a 4/4 flyer as well, I just can't say no to it. It's such good value. So Steel Hellkite, a great source of mass removal, can affect 3 players at once, potentially. It's on a 5/5 flying body for 6 of any color. And again, because this deck doubles its swamps frequently, we end up getting Steel Hellkite pretty quickly and control of the board pretty quickly as well. Runescarred Demon, tutor slapped onto a 6/6 flying demon body for 7 mana, 2 black, 5 generic. Whenever Runescarred Demon enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Pretty straightforward, just gets you the cards that you need. Excellent because it comes back with creature recursion, which there is a fair amount of in this deck as well. So this is kind of like, it's just good. It's just a tutor on a creature's body. What else can I say about that? The last creature we have here, another big flavor card, Myojin of Night's Reach. Costs 8. It's the highest costed card in this deck. It's a legendary creature, spirit. Its effect reads, Myojin of Night's Reach comes into play with a divinity counter on it if you played it from your hand, which 9 times out of 10 it will because we're playing it from our hand. Myojin of Night's Reach is indestructible as long as it has a divinity counter on it. So when it comes out, it's a 5/2 with indestructible already. Remove a divinity counter from Myojin of Night's Reach. Each opponent discards his or her hand. That's just crazy. For 8, each opponent discards their hand, and then you have a 5/2 creature. Pretty good. I'm not going to lie, it's in here for the flavor, but I'm curious and excited to see if I can make this card work in this deck. Hand control is a facet of what we're working with here, so theoretically it does fit. And because we can double our swamps pretty quickly and easily. 8 mana doesn't really seem like a lot. I haven't been able to play it yet, unfortunately, but I think it will do well. And once I play it, I guess we'll see in one of our future videos. So we're going to move on to our enchantments here. Bloodchief Ascension, great card, combos with Mind Crank for an infinite combo win. Next, Underworld Connections, draw power to pay 1 life, and it can last a whole game. It can draw you 10 cards. It can draw you 12 cards, 15. It's just good. It's not a do-nothing enchantment. Black Market, big time mana. Creatures are always dying in EDH, and especially in this deck. So for 5 black mana, whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on Black Market. So you could play this, kill 2 creatures, put 2 charge counters on it, and then at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add black mana to your mana pool for each charge counter on Black Market. The longer it stays on the battlefield, the better it gets, and it really just gives you so much advantage mid to late game. So that's big mana right there. That's how we get big mana in this deck. Phyrexian Reclamation, 1 black mana, enchantment, 1 and a black, and pay 2 life. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. This is just crazy. We're always going to be doing this. We're always going to be bringing our creatures back that have Death Touch, that tutor things up for us. Our Room-Scarred Demon can come back a few times mid to late game. And the cost of 2 life isn't really a big deal, especially with Sangromancer and Vampire Nighthawk and things like that in there. Arguel's Bloodfast, legendary enchantment, 1 and a black, pay 2 life, draw a card. Repeatable as many times as you want, provided that you have mana and life points to pay for it. The second effect, I've never used it. Grave Betrayal. Whenever a creature you don't control dies, return it to the battlefield under your control with an additional +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. It's a form of redundancy with Mimic Vat. Because we kill so many creatures, one of our win cons is to take them once we kill them. That's proven to be a pretty strong effect in this deck here. We just kill so many creatures. Moving on to our sorceries, we're going to start at the lowest part of the curve with Duress. Super good. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land from it. That player discards that card for 1 black mana. Unfortunately, it's a sorcery. If it was an instant, it would just be the best card in the deck, probably. But for what it is, you end up hitting a lot of very important cards, more often than not. And it's like a low-risk investment because it costs 1 black mana. So if you don't hit anything, it's like, okay, well, I still have the rest of my turn to play other things. Distress, not duress, distress. Essentially a duress, but you can target creatures. Sorcery speed, 2 black mana. Target player reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. Hand control. We're just getting in people's minds. Read the bones. See a lot of cards for 2 life. Super good. Super good. You want to see a lot of cards. You want to draw a lot of cards. You want to have a lot of options. Bontu's Last Reckoning. Destroy all creatures. Lands you control don't untap during your next untap step. A board wipe in black for 3 mana, 2 and 1 generic, 2 black, 1 generic. The fact that lands you control don't untap during your next untap step, you can work around that for a board wipe for 3. That's pretty crazy. Beseech the Queen. This is a great tutor in this deck. Better mid to late game, of course, but potentially, it's a tutor for 3, and there's a lot of great 3 CMC cards in here. And then it can be a tutor for 12 later in the game. Diabolic Tutor, just a great tutor for 4, 2 black, 2 generic. It's a sorcery. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. Very straightforward, just gets you the card you need. Sadistic Sacrament, big prevention. 3 black mana, sorcery speed. It has kicker 7. So ultimately you would be paying 10 mana for its kicker cost. It says, search target player's library for up to 3 cards, exile them, then that player shuffles his or her library. If Sadistic Sacrament was kicked, instead search that player's library for up to 15 cards, exile them, then that player shuffles his or her library. This can be pretty devastating, although I only really use it for its 3 mana cost effect because, if you have 10 mana to spend, you're probably mid-late game, and your opponents probably have the majority of what they need to win. So it's kind of just an insult to remove 15 cards, and then you become a target, and you're 10 mana down. So I don't know. It hasn't worked well for me, the kicker cost effect, but I'm sure there are situations where it could be pretty devastating. Victimize. Choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. Sacrifice a creature. If you do, put the 2 chosen creatures into play tapped. Value Train. If you have no more use for Vampire Nighthawk, play this on it. You get back Runescarred Demon and something else absurd. Plague Crafter, for example. Have Plague Crafter sack itself again. Anything can happen. It's crazy. Profane Command, 2 black and X. Sorcery. Choose 2. Target player loses X life, or return target creature card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, or target creature gets -X until end of turn, or up to X target creatures gain fear until end of turn. Ton of options. It's just, you just want choices. A lot of the blank command cards are very good for that reason alone. Promise of Power. I like to imagine that's Toshiro with demon energy in the picture. He looks just like he's about to explode. So it costs 5 mana, 3 black, 2 generic. It's a sorcery. Choose 1. You draw 5 cards and lose 5 life. Or put a black demon creature token with flying into play with power and toughness equal to the number of cards in your hand as the token comes into play. So when you play this, for example, if you have 5 cards in your hand and you play this card for its demon effect, the demon enters the battlefield as a 4/4 because you've reduced your hand count by 1 by playing Promise of Power in the first place. Still pretty good card. It's really, really good for its Entwine effect. You just do both if you pay an additional 4 mana. So if you pay 9, you draw 5 cards and lose 5 life, and put black demon token into play. And at that point, if you stack it properly, it will be at least a 5/5 if you're playing this with no cards in your hand, because you've drawn 5 cards and then you've made the demon. But if you have 5 cards in hand already and you play this and draw 5 more, you're at 9 cards in hand. After playing this, you have a 9/9 demon creature. And just insane hand advantage. So again, we can afford to play high CMC cards like that because of our ability to double our swamps. And along with that, speaking of high CMC cards, Necromantic Selection costs 7, 3 black, 4 generic mana, sorcery. Destroy all creatures, then return a creature card put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. It's a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Exile Necromantic Selection. So this is, again, first of all, mass removal, which is very important in any deck. But once it kills things, it brings one of them back. And that fits with our theme. We want kill recursion. We want to take other people's creatures mid to late game to potentially win that way. Not that that's our only way, but that is one strong way to do it. And this card has been incredibly helpful for me in many different situations. So the last kind of card we're going to look at in this Toshiro EDH deck is Artifact. We are looking at our artifacts in this deck and seeing how they work. We're going to start with the obvious Soul Ring, mana ramp, Nihil Spellbomb. Great graveyard hate. It's actually come in handy very frequently for me against all different kinds of decks. And it also draws you a card if you pay 1 black mana when you sacrifice it. So, we just want to be drawing cards, really. The last card in our 1 mana slot here is Sensei's Divining Top. Because mono black, or at least this build of this mono black deck, doesn't have the most draw power. It has some pretty good draw power. We need more filtering, pretty much. And Sensei's Divining Top gives us that filter. And like I mentioned before, it interacts really wondrously with Vampiric Tutor. It really puts that card right in our hand if we want it. It lets me have an active hand for 1 mana, instead of spending 2 turns before I can have an active hand. And it protects itself because if it's targeted with removal, it can just go right on top of your deck and you draw a card. In the 2 mana slot, going with flavor first, Umezawa's Jite, very versatile, combat-oriented equipment here. It's one of the few equipments we run in this deck. It's the number one reason we run it is because of its flavor. Toshiro Umezawa, this is his Jite. But it helps us in a lot of situations, either gain us life, or it can make Toshiro big and swing in for commander damage, or it can start a kill spell Toshiro chain here. Umezawa's Jite is a legendary artifact equipment that costs 2 generic mana. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage, put 2 charge counters on Umezawa's Jite. Remove a charge counter from Jite. Choose one. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, or target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or you gain 2 life, and it costs 2 to equip. So that means that if I attach this to my Hypnotic Specter and I fly in and I get 2 charge counters, I can get one of these modes twice at instant speed, because the activated effect is that I am removing 1 charge counter and choosing one of these functions. But because when the creature that's equipped with this hits, it gets 2 counters, we get double the effects at the bottom at instant speed, basically for free. It's just very good. I mean, it's a classic. I feel like I shouldn't have even said that much about it. Mindcrank works with Blood Chief Ascension. So if you can get Blood Chief Ascension triggered and going, and you deal 1 damage to an opponent, they mill their whole deck. Super good. And it's won a few times. Mind Stone, mana ramp, mid to late game draws you a card. Lightning Greaves obviously protects Toshiro and some other valuable creatures. Swiftfoot Boots, Whisper Silk, again meant to protect our creatures. Ratchet Bomb is a kind of tricky removal spell, or artifact I should say, but it is a spell when you play it. Ratchet Bomb's an artifact that costs 2 generic mana. Tap it, put a charge counter on it. Tap it, sacrifice it, destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Ratchet Bomb. So, if someone has a bunch of tokens out, play it, tap, sacrifice it, destroy all their tokens immediately for 2 mana. Amazing. And then you just take it up as you go, and if you can predict what the opponent's going to play, you can see their commander, so you can keep that. You can tick it up to say you're playing Feldon, for example, another one of my decks. Tap this, it'll take you 3 turns, but you can have this waiting for Feldon for when it enters the battlefield, and then you just tap, sacrifice this, destroy Feldon. It's even more versatile than that. That's just one example. Mimic Vat, so it's a 3-cost artifact, 3 generic mana. It has Imprint. Whenever a non-token creature is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may exile that card. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vat to its owner's graveyard. So it's worded a little confusingly, but essentially, whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you exile that particular card, and then that's the only card you have exiled with this card. You can't exile multiple creatures, so it's basically restricting you to 1 creature at a time. Its second effect, 3 generic mana and tap Mimic Vat. Put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of the exiled card. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. It's great offensive and defensively, and because we're killing so many creatures with all of our kill spells, this really sees a lot of use. It's another win con for us. Strata Scythe, another win con. Exile a swamp. All we're playing is swamps. So mid to late game, this could give a creature +10/+10 if we have 10 swamps on the battlefield. I'll read it specifically because some people might not know it. Strata Scythe, 3 generic mana for an artifact equipment that also has Imprint. When Strata Scythe enters the battlefield, search your library for a land card, exile it, then shuffle your library. So you don't even take a land card from your hand, you tutor out a land card and exile it with this. So you're thinning your deck. I think that's probably a good thing for this deck. You don't want to just keep drawing lands. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land on the battlefield with the same name as the exiled card. So not only does that work for your board state, your cards, your swamps, but it works for all of your opponent's swamps as well. And if you have something like Urborg out, which changes all lands to swamps, or it makes them swamps in addition to their other types, this card can get you through to a win with Toshiro through commander damage. If you have infect cards, if you swapped out any of my creatures for some infect nasties, this can help you win like that. My favorite card in this deck, and the last card we're going to look at today, is Bolas Citadel. It costs 6 mana to play it. It's a legendary artifact. 3 black, 3 generic mana. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. Already pretty crazy with Sensei's Divining Top especially. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. That's what we use this card for in this deck. The last ability, tap, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life. We're never really going to do that. And I've spent a lot of life before playing this, and the amount of card advantages it's gathered me has made up for it. Also, insanely great combo with Aether Flux Reservoir, which I don't play in this deck, but I've lost to this combo, Bolas Citadel and Aether Flux Reservoir, a few times. So I guess the last thing we'll go into real quick is lands. Lands are super important. I'm not going to, go into too much detail, but I will highlight some of the lands that I think play an important role in this deck that could easily be looked over or just not considered in the first place. There's only a few, so we'll make it quick. Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, legendary land. Each land is a swamp in addition to its other types. That changes cards like Detection Tower into swamps and helps you double them. It just maximizes your ability to double your swamps, but it also aids cards like Strata Scythe. Detection Tower, land, tap, add 1, waste. 1 generic mana and tap Detection Tower. Until end of turn, your opponents and creatures your opponents control with hexproof can be the target of spells and abilities you control, as though they didn't have hexproof. So this gets our kill spells through. Blighted Fen, actually an amazing card in this deck. I have like 20 of these and I never play them, but this is the correct application for this kind of card. So tap gives you 1 generic mana, tap 4 and a black, and tap Blighted Fen. So you're down 6 mana, but when you sacrifice this, target opponent sacrifices a creature. And this is good because it's sneaky. It sits in the background, potentially, saves the game after you've exhausted all of your kill spells. It's just good. Like a sacrifice effect on a land, it's good. Cabal Stronghold doubles your swamps. Again, tap, add 1 waste, tap 3, and Cabal Stronghold, add 1 swamp for each basic swamp you control. So if you have Urborg out, it doubles all of your lands. Just helps you get more swamps. Baron Moor, if you have too many swamps. Cycle this, draw a new card. Bojuka Bog, Graveyard Hate, amazing, on a land. Zafran Void, actually very important to this deck because of its scry ability. Again, you just want to see cards, you want to find answers. And the fact that it gives you 1 waste instead of a swamp is not a huge deal because we're in a monocolored deck in the first place, but we also have Urborg to give it swampiness later. And the last land, other than our basic lands, is Ghost Quarter. It's really good, in case you're being locked out by somebody's Maze of Ith or some other really annoying land. Arixmethes gets rid of Arixmethes in a funny way. There should be more utility lands in here. That's admittedly the thing that I've invested in the least, but that's just more to come in the future. More deck techs, different cards, different strategies. But that's it for today. So thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for being interested in what I think is an underrated commander. And if you have any ideas, any suggestions, any other tweaks to make to this, I would love to read anything that you guys have for this kind of deck. Put your advice, your tweaks in the comments below. I'll be sure to check them out and I'll reply to them. Thanks for watching.